NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act, that Obama has called for and signed, stipulates that even American citizens can now be targeted by the military, picked up, and imprisoned.
Awesome! Glad I could help. Hey, bitch! We're going to the finals. You want a ticket?
By December, we would have 100 million vaccines, and by January of 2021, we'd have 200 million vaccines. And we were going to have the military roll this out to spread it. I talked to the president's advisor, and he says, well, did anything sound strange to you in that comment? And I said, well, yeah, the military part, because you'd use the National Guard or the reserves, but you couldn't use the active duty military. You can only activate the National Guard, and you can maybe activate the reserves, but you can't use active military. He's prior military himself, and he said, yeah, anything else? I said, no, I didn't notice anything else. He said, what were the dates when he's going to roll out these vaccines? I said, December and January. And he goes, and when are the elections? I said, November. And he started chuckling.
Are surveilling computer systems that control America's infrastructure.
It's now clear this cyber threat is one of the most serious national security challenges we face as a nation.
And it might have the ability to go in and cripple financial networks, nuclear plants, chemical plants, all of which would have devastating effects.
North Korea continues to act in a provocative and belligerent manner. There are consequences to such actions.
Fueling the fire. What would North Korea possibly hope to gain?
What will be the next step?
What is it that they want?
What are they preparing for?
To the topic today is the issue of pandemic preparedness. And if there's one message that I want to leave with you today, based on my experience, and you'll see that in a moment, is that there is no question that there will be a challenge to the coming administration in the arena of infectious diseases, both chronic infectious diseases in the sense of already ongoing disease, and we have certainly a large burden of that, but also there will be a surprise outbreak,
Famous saying, never waste a good crisis, and I think that's very important. If you are in a crisis situation, you need to think about how to turn that to your advantage. And candidly, if you're not in a crisis situation, sometimes the best way to get change done is to create a crisis and then use that to your advantage. So it isn't always a bad situation to have immediate challenges, lack of resources, and so on. You just have to think about how to turn that to your advantage to get the result that you need.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Donald Trump Museum, dedicated to America's #1 citizen and America's greatest living folk hero, the one and only Donald Trump. Learn the amazing history of the Trump family.
Somebody criticized me the other day because they asked me what I do, and I said, I'm going to bomb the shit out of them. It's true. I don't care. Friends, and I guess I have some very good enemies, and I like it that way somehow, and I really believe in trashing your enemies.
Inside, you will learn how Donald Trump's father left him a large inheritance.
Nobody's going to do more women than Donald Trump. That I can tell you. That I can tell you. And I think they know it.
Discover how in 2016 Donald Trump successfully lobbied to legalize gambling.
Part of the beauty of me is that I'm very rich.
He wants to run for president and move on into the White House. Why not?
Share in the stupidity of the average American as they made him the 45th president of the United States.
That will easily go down as the greatest president in the history of the United States. Me, Donald John Trump.
No! Hey, go! Hey, Greg, you come with us upstairs? There you go, Sonny. We can do this the easy way or the hard way.
Donald Trump was one of several of those types of guys that we thought about and modeled Biff after, yes.
In part 2 of my chinwag with Bob Gale, the Back to the Future creator explained why he modeled Bully Biff on Donald Trump.
The Red Dawn remake focused on Chinese villains taken on the US Gov, but now the word is MGM has decided to spend around $1 million to change the villains in post to North Koreans. Apparently they felt having Chinese villains invade the US would not bode well for our ties with the country, so North Korean villains would be a safer bet.
I'm telling you, they're going to crash the economy and there's going to be a war, and it looks like it's going to be with China. Now, I'm about to call Floorbrun because I want to go over this headline with her, and she's got a spiel about China, and I think she's right. Talk to her about it because she's researched this a lot more than me. The Chinese media is accusing the U.S. of hoping to start a war between China and India or China and Japan, and Trump just came out today and he's restricting Chinese media outlets. He's deemed them propaganda.
Oh.
I wanted my people to hear your spiel about China.
Okay, well, I think I've kind of talked to you about this before when I did a show over a year ago talking about the resurgence of an actual Red Dawn, which is a movie that it was many years ago. It was the 80s version, then futuristically there was another version later on that was created talking about there being an inside war with, I think it was Korea at the time. There was Asiatics, people from Asia, who came on land and created the World War III in the United States, and Russia. I think it was the second. I don't know if the second version was Russia, but it was Russia and China.
Yeah.
Okay, so my take on it is, and I've always said this, when I realized that in Mexico, one of the reasons that the president was trying so desperately to create a wall was more than just Mexicans coming in. It had to do with a large percentage of Asiatics that were noted to be Chinese that were on the Mexican border, who, because the Chinese and the Mexicans have some of the same Mongolian genomes, they look very similar unless you hear them talk.
Yeah.
And a couple of our people had noted that over on the Tijuana side, there was so many Chinese that it was so startling. And then we got intel later that there were truckloads of people coming in via some of those borders, those open parts of the borders, whether it's a tunneling system or making it through the cracks, and they were Chinese. Now, fast forward, we know that there has been the notion that the Chinese have been buying properties and companies in the States for over 20 years. They have been slowly, but it's been happening more readily over the last, I would say, over the last 5 to 6 years, it's been doubling. And we also denoted that, them buying, I think it was the Tyson, I don't know if it's Purdue or Tyson company, some of the meat companies, the industry, the pork industry, I forgot which one it was. It was one of the pork industry companies, and another one was a chicken. They were buying up all those companies in order to keep those resources for themselves. That's why they were pushing for all the veganism and vegetarianism, because they were going to make sure that all those meat resources were only going to be designated to those Asian compadres that are here in the States. So my theory is they're here. They've bought up most of the United States. I've talked about the fact that from what I've heard from Intel over the years is that they bought majority of the states, with the exception of California and Hawaii. And Hawaii I think is understandable because there's a lot of Japanese in Hawaii rather than Chinese.
Yeah.
And because of that, they would have to give the public a public theatrical scene of why they've lost the country to others. So I personally think that the war on the border, I think I sent that to you, a friend of mine sent me intel that the war on the border between India and China just got more tense because they need that last border in order to infiltrate. They need that port in order to do the last stage of the infiltration into the States fully. They took over the ports in Jamaica. A lot of our island people denoted that they took over the ports in Jamaica. If you do know, I think it was 6 to 7 months ago, Russian boats, big, huge boats and some aircraft were seen and witnessed going to Cuba, bringing over something. And do know why the destabilization of Venezuela was more than just them the United States trying to take over Venezuela's resources. It had more to do with the fact that the Chinese and Russia had a lot of stake in there, and it was one other direction that they could infiltrate us on that side in South America. So my theory is everything was purposefully being set up to inevitably take over the states and create a mock situation where they already took over financially and corporate-wise.
Yeah.
All they need to do is orchestrate a theatrical occurrence of war. So I think we're going to see it. I see military people in Orlando.
Have you heard of China's Operation Bedbugs? Have you heard of that?
No.
Okay, well, check it out. China, about 10 years ago, started a government program called Operation Bedbugs, okay? And what they did is the goal was to buy key properties around the world and erect hotels. I'm looking at a map right now of the Chinese-owned properties, just the hotels. Now, they own much more than just hotel property in the U.S. But I'm talking about every state. I mean, it's every 100 miles across the U.S. they own not only property but hotels. I mean, I'll have to send you a link to this map. You'll be shocked when you see it. You'll be shocked how much they own.
No, I'm not shocked. You know why? Because when I started to see the dissemination of Chinese all over Orlando, I said to myself, where are they coming from? That makes more sense to me because that means they're hosting people without anyone noticing. You would notice if they were in houses, apartments, because other people could witness that. But you wouldn't notice if you had a plane full of Chinese and they were staying in a hotel that was only manned by Chinese and there wasn't anybody to witness that there is a plethora of these people in the country.
Yeah, and listen, they're going to, well, I believe the stock market's already crashed. They've injected
It has been.
over
money so they can see later.
They've injected over 50 trillion to keep people from seeing what's happened.
I saw it.
Yeah, dude, it's something insane. It's like it's 200 billion a night they're injecting right now, every night.
That's artificial. That's artificial inflation. That means when it crashed, that means the economy's crashed. It's totally crashed. That elevation is going to show up around November or December.
Yeah, and what I'm thinking, what do? Every time they crash the economy, they have a big war to get all the money back. And to,
they do.
Dude, and I think they're going to use China. So I'm watching everything in the news about China really, really closely. Scrolling through it, these are just Chinese-owned hotels. I saw a map which I was looking for and couldn't find, and China owns over 25% of the U.S. property. So look for China and the U.S. to get into it. If China and the U.S. get into it, it'll be a perfect excuse for them to be here. That's what she was saying. all the property they own, that's a perfect excuse to have a war and America lose, so that now you understand why all these Chinese people are here. Well, we had a war and we lost. I think they have decided, the elite, that America has to be destroyed. The freedoms that we do have, they have to be taken away, because as long as America remains sovereign, there's not going to be a one world government. America has to fall. They've taken weapons rights away from the whole world for the most part, except for Americans. We're next. We're losing our freedom next. I guarantee it. They're going to crash the economy. They're going to have a big war, and the U.S. is going to be on the losing side. And I think it's all been pre-planned.
Here's another one out of Como News, out of Seattle. Chinese media show Seattle as potential nuclear target. That came out last week.
Let the games begin.
Today is a milestone moment for what will later be November 3 Alpha, will be the call sign for the aircraft. It's his first day out of the hangar, and we're using today to begin doing engine testing. We're going to be calibrating some of the instrumentation and avionics today as well.
Weeks have passed since the mysterious Seattle crash. Astrologers are astonished and rapidly looking for answers. For the most part, society is back to normal, except for the white particle-like snow that has spread.
From this day forward, it's
You know, he reminds me of that guy in The Wizard of Oz. You know, when you pull back the curtain, it's a really small dude.
Okay.
Last night, the United States brought the world's #1 terrorist leader to justice. He died after running into a dead-end tunnel, whimpering and crying and screaming all the way. The compound had been cleared by this time, with people either surrendering or being shot and killed. 11 young children were moved out of the house and are uninjured. The only ones remaining were Baghdadi in the tunnel, and he had dragged 3 of his young children with him. They were led to certain death.
I have a truck full of Mexicans, a truck full of Chinese, and a truck full of Islamic terrorists. What truck do you not want entering the United States?
Chinese.
Do you think President Obama believes that there are Chinese coming over the border through Mexico?
I don't know. I'm not certain, and that is where we may disagree. I'm not certain how much we have to fear Chinese coming across the border.
In this part of the world, we don't have a lot of tourist attractions, but this is one of them. This is an emergency distress beacon. And most people find it curious that it's in 3 languages, English, Spanish, and Chinese. And since the last time we were out here, they've even been so nice as to add a 5-gallon bucket of water, courtesy of the United States government. This has been here at least a couple of years. They put it here for a specific reason, because this is the point that they travel quite a bit. There are 8 of them along the Texas border.
I have a question for you. Why do you think that sign should be down along the border in Texas? Written in English, written in Spanish, and in Chinese. The government made that, Congressman.
Our government?
Yes. I mean, you've been in Congress for 22 years, right?
Right.
Okay. Has anybody ever showed you that picture before?
No.
Nobody's ever.
No.
Nobody's
No.
ever gone to one of your hearings and said, "Look at this picture."
No.
No. Marketing 101. Make your advertisements to the people who are going to read them.
We know they're coming in here. We caught a hodgepodge group back out here, 16. Had 2 Asian girls, Chinese. They both spoke English. And both of them paid $50,000 each to come in here.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Then we had, and in that same group, we had at least 3 or 4 Indians and a couple of Pakistanis. I think there was 1 Mexican in the group. That was it.
Am I wrong in saying that the president's #1 job is to keep Americans safe?
Yeah, everything else is secondary to that. Clearly, it's not even that it's the main, to me, it's the #1, 2, and 3. Everything else, no matter how important anything else is, health, education, none of that matters if we're dead.
How would you describe President Obama's attitude toward the war on terror?
I would say it's very schizophrenic. damaging, and it's been very frustrating.
So, Congressman, what you're saying is that the #1 job of the President of the United States is being handled in a schizophrenic manner.
Yeah.
So in the months ahead, I will continue to engage Congress to ensure not only that our targeting, detention, and prosecution of terrorists remains consistent with our laws and system of checks and balances, but that our efforts are even more transparent to the American people and to the world. We cannot look back years from now and wonder why we did nothing in the face of real threats to our security and our economy.
Shortly after President Obama's State of the Union address, his administration allowed 2,000 of the most dangerous illegal aliens detained in U.S. prisons to be released into the general public. The White House blamed this on looming budget cuts that would not take effect for another 30 days. Janet Napolitano denies any involvement. I sent an email to the Department of Homeland Security in which I asked, if the funding to detain 2,000 criminals was no longer available, why not release Americans whose sentences were coming to a close in the near future? I did not receive a reply. As of April 2013, the whereabouts and names of the released criminals remain classified.